and speak and debate at forums. And one of the best ones was actually, wouldn't you agree, the TC Palm? We had a wonderful discussion, and in fact, I don't know if you know this, but they just had in the paper, the TC Palm is for, we get the benefit of having two totally independent media markets that have nothing to do with each other because we have Indian River County and Brevard County in our district. But down in Indian River County, they have TC Palm. And they interviewed us, and just the other day, they said that I got the award for having the best interview, but it was not necessarily just because it was a good interview of me, but because we had a great back and forth, that we could have a civil debate with each other and share ideas, and even though we agree, you would say, on very little, we were able to have these discussions, and they found it very educational for them, and they found it a very interesting and lively debate, but a respectful debate. And I think that's important, and I really appreciate that they called that out. And I wish that we had the video of that for more people to have seen it, because unfortunately it was just 4 journalists that got to see it. But anyway, let me give you a little bit about my background. I come from the computer industry. And I've never been in politics in my life. I guess I'm what you would call a citizen candidate. But the bottom line is I'm really worried about what's happening to our country and to our state. And I think it's going to take people like me, leaders from the private sector, to step up and get us back on track. And that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. And so I'm sure you'll be able to judge whether you would agree with that sentiment as I answer the questions tonight. And if you don't hear the answers that you need, or if you have other questions that don't get answered here tonight, there's plenty of opportunities for us to speak afterwards as well. So I look forward to it, and thank you very much.
Make believe like you've never been to any one of these.
Okay, well, this is fantastic. I've been to a lot of these, but I don't think I've been to one that's any better than this in terms of the layout, the planning, the filming. I commend you. I really, really commend you for coming and really caring enough to be here. And I think that's one fundamental difference between our two candidacies. I have been deeply involved in Republican politics and campaigns for over 30 years. I cannot count the number of House or Senate campaigns I volunteered for before running for office. I served an entire session as an intern where I worked for free to understand and learn the process of Tallahassee. I was the co-chair with Bill McCollum on the Rudy Giuliani presidential bid. I was the Brevard chairman for Pete Wilson, when former governor of California, a good, solid Republican, when he ran for president. I've worked numerous presidential campaigns. It's been my life. I love the Republican Party. I love its principles, and I will continue to fight for them, whether I'm elected or not. I was a part of this party when we were the minority in Brevard County. I worked in the legislature as an intern when Republicans were in the basement, right by the garage. And we had 4 Republican members sharing the office of probably what is equivalent to 1 Senate office. We can never take for granted the fact that we will always be the majority party. We must forever be diligent to prevent us from going back and allowing the Democrats to control Tallahassee or Washington, for that matter. It's important as a Republican that we work together. I've been a part of a delegation that will now have the 2nd Senate president within the last 6 years. I'm a part of a leadership team that will bring the Senate presidency and the Speaker of the House at the same time. We have a phenomenal opportunity to change the course of our state. We have a phenomenal opportunity to keep our Republican agenda and to ensure that we maintain the freedoms and the prosperities and the environment that it will allow Florida to move into the future. I think it's important that we elect a senator that doesn't have to go and learn the process, but understands the process, that has the relationships and the experience to support our leadership and to implement our Republican agenda. And that, I think, is the biggest difference in our two candidacy. It's not time, especially now, to weaken our Republican delegation or to bring a member that has to learn. This is it for me. I'm termed out after this 4 years, and it will be, I've been involved in this process off and on for 30 years. I've served over 20 years, as well as volunteering in the legislature prior to that as an intern. I'm ready to go to Tallahassee at a time where we can really make a difference and take advantage of that experience and commitment.
Thank you. And I do not mean any disrespect. I want to completely say, know that right up front, that if I tell you to sit down and be quiet, that is with all the love in my heart. Okay, we're going to start with Thad. Okay, you have 3 minutes for the question. And based on the fact that you are the chair of the Military Veterans Affairs Space and Domestic Security Chair, my question is this. The recent loss of SpaceX's commercial space hub to Texas was created in part towards the Texas legislature making it more attractive to launch in Texas. What do you believe the Florida legislators, and especially the Brevard delegation, should do not to lose the next opportunity?
Well, I was sad to see that SpaceX chose to go to South Texas and launch, but not surprised. SpaceX desperately wants and needs a fully privatized launch facility. Space Florida is making an effort to create one in Shiloh, north of the Kennedy Space Center. But I think Elon Musk and SpaceX realized that that would not be ready. But that said, we didn't lose SpaceX. SpaceX just signed an agreement with NASA to launch the Falcon Heavy, a rocket with 27 motor rocket engines on the bottom, to launch that at 39A, what was formerly a shuttle and an Apollo 1 launch site. A huge win for the Space Coast. SpaceX has another launch facility at the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station, where they're launching their Falcon 9. So there still is a huge, huge presence. And I think no matter what we did, probably we would have seen those launches go to Texas, because I think SpaceX realizes what so many other companies realize, that we have a national space program, and having a presence throughout the country is going to help them get the public support that they need to fulfill their agenda. We're also seeing launches in Virginia. We'll see horizontal launches in New Mexico. So we know that the launch business is expanding nationwide, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. What we need to do is to make sure we stay very competitive in the things that we do best. And what we do best is human spaceflight, and what we do best is heavy lift capabilities. Because there's nowhere in the world any better to launch those big rockets that are required for both of those. So I'm committed to continue to work with Space Florida. We've had major wins, a major win with Falcon, with SpaceX. We've had a major win with the assembly of the Orion vehicle, the capsule that will go to Mars. First time in the history of the space program that a space capsule, is being built right here on the Space Coast. They always were built elsewhere, and they were checked out here. But as a result of an appropriation and a partnership with Lockheed Martin, we're bringing the full assembly of a spacecraft here. So we've had a lot of good news, and I think the future is bright. There's a lot of things happening that will really keep us in the leadership in the space program.
Thank you, Ted. Monique, same question to you.
So,
would you like me to repeat it?
Well, am I repeating this question?
What do you believe the Florida legislators, and especially the Brevard delegation, should do to not lose the next opportunity?
So the short answer is to stay out of it. One of the biggest concerns I have about Florida in general is that there's increasingly a blurred line between the private sector and government. If you talk about a private business, then stop using public funds to fund projects in a private business. This is an increasing trend that I'm seeing in every industry, and space is not an exception. In fact, it's probably an even bigger culprit than most. If we allow people who are on the outside and not the free market, if we allow our legislators to pick and choose the winners, what we end up with are companies who get picked and chosen or not, and the first time that they feel slighted, they're likely to leave. You cannot bribe people and create an environment of free economy and trust. And this is just a big problem across the board. There are ways to make this an environment for everybody, to make it an attractive environment for everybody. And I don't think it's any different for space. First of all, we have no income tax in Florida. Second of all, we have a lot of very talented workers. When I was at Hewlett-Packard, one of the most rare resources that we had, we were desperate to find people who were engineers that could come in and replace the people who were retiring. And the problem is we couldn't find them. And so what did we do? We actually went to Washington to lobby to let us bring them in from other countries. And this is absurd. So we're not pairing up those resources with the supply that we have here. And they're obviously not finding it a good enough business climate for them to install themselves despite these wonderful things that we have here. So that brings me to the third thing. If anybody has tried to open a business here lately, you know that we are on regulation overload. The amount of regulation required for somebody to open a business, you're practically out of business before you even open the door, and it's absolutely out of control, and it has to stop. And this requires somebody in your legislature to work with the local county commissioners and your local leaders to make sure that we figure out a way to bring that down and get rid of any useless regulations that are on the books that aren't being enforced. That's the easy thing to do first, right? If there's no enforcement mechanism, get rid of it. That's the number one thing that we need to do. The second thing we need to do is to make it attractive to everybody. And how do you do that? You reduce taxes for everybody. You stop taking money from everybody and giving it to one company, and you decide that you're going to let the free market decide what's the best company to bring here and let them decide that they want to come and install themselves here, and they're going to make a bigger commitment to the community as a result of that decision. And that's what I believe we need to do for every program, not just space.
Thank you. Do you like this setup tonight? The debate style and no table in front of them? Is that okay?
Nice.
Yeah, I like it too. Okay, we're going to go to environmental. I think that we've had a little bit of discussion about environmental in the past, but we're going to try and keep it a little bit fresher this time. Admittedly, the lagoon and the Yawgali River, which was in my district when I served for 8 years, are 50 years behind in cleanup efforts. When I began my service on council in 2004, Melbourne lobbied for funds to clean up the Yawgali River, and every year following. Why has so much become available now in terms of funding? What has happened? What's changed? Monique?
Well, I can't speak to why funding has become available now, but unfortunately there was about $230 million that was allocated to help with the Indian River Lagoon. 70% of that lagoon sits here in this district, and unfortunately 90% of that money went down to the South District, and that's just unfortunate. We didn't have good representation on that. We didn't have somebody who fought for that money to bring it back where it is needed, and I agree with you, there are certain projects that absolutely have not gotten the attention that they deserve. There are a number of ways that we can address the environmental issues, and one of them, it brings me back to what we were just talking about for business. I spent several months donating my time to help with the Indian River Lagoon and the Lagoon Action Assembly, and I found it quite funny that I was obviously one of the few conservatives, in fact, the lone conservative in the room, but I believed in the process that we were following. It was something that I, as a conservative, could get behind. It was a process that was developed by President Eisenhower to solve complex problems. Without going into too much detail about it, it was a successful thing of bringing community representation together into a room and driving us towards consensus to an action plan. And that was great. We came up with an action plan, and this is going to become an annual event. However, if there's no ability to actually implement it because of all of the layers of regulation, what is the point in coming up with the plan at all? And so what they really need for us to do in the legislature, I was actually their liaison with a lot of, with Tallahassee at the time. So I worked very closely with Steve Crisafoli and Rich Workman and some of the other folks up there. And what I learned is that, we need to have the coordinated effort to pull back some of this regulation. We have a national estuary program. We have the Army Corps of Engineers. We have a national byway program, whatever that is. And this is just at the federal level. Then you go down to the next level. And of course, don't forget the federal EPA that's just all too excited to be there. And then you have, Florida EPA. You have many, many different groups within Florida that also have, they are responsible for it to some extent, but nobody is ultimately responsible. And so that's why nothing happens on any of these projects, especially you have water management districts divided over the lagoon. And this goes for pretty much any body of water in Florida. There's no good way for us to spearhead these efforts. And I'd like to see increasingly local organizations like Marine Resources Council and some of the others taking that leadership position and stop looking to government to solve the problems, because I think we've shown over the last 30 years that government's not the answer.
Yeah.